There are so many things that we can be spending our summer doing. But some new studies are showing that maybe the best thing we can do with our kids this summer is to help them develop a love for reading. It might be picking up that book off the shelf that we've always intended to read as a family and reading it. It can be a really hard thing to start and practice those muscles in your family, especially when you might have a kid that doesn't sit still well. And so today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in our daily segment, Facing the Dark, we're going to turn to Dr. Kathy for some insights on why reading is so important for young people, and also how we can take little steps to develop a love for reading in our kids. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Koch.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So Dr. Kathy, as early as the 1970s, research concluded that reading was the only activity that was, quote, strongly and consistently related to summer learning, end quote. Fast forward that reality to the early 2000s, and education researchers are declaring that a lack of access to books during summer break could actually translate to a 2-month loss in reading achievement for children from low-income families. A survey by the National Assessment of Educational Progress that began in 1984 and was most recently conducted in late 2019 and early 2020, it asked U.S. kids ages 9 to 13 whether they read for fun almost every day. In the most recent survey, 42% of 9-year-olds said they read almost every day for fun, compared to 53% in both 2012 and 1984. Only 17% of 13-year-olds said they read almost daily for fun, compared to 27% in 2012 and 35% in 1984. So, Dr. Kathy, I think that self-reporting surveys are, kind of interesting, right? But at the same time, this is the perception that young people have of their reading in the summer. So I'm a little surprised that it was actually at 42%, just kind of knowing the kids that I have in my community. And maybe our community is a little bit down from the national average. But all of that aside, I know that you've talked about the importance of reading for pleasure. Why do you think that we should encourage our kids to kind of read for pleasure?
It's one of the reasons adults read. So if children don't discover that reading for pleasure is relaxing and can take you to places you can't go on your own and all those kinds of things, then maybe as they age out of school, they won't read if they have the kind of career that doesn't require it. And reading for pleasure, it is relaxing. It can relieve stress and anxiety. Book clubs and communities can be built off of that. The other reason that's huge is vocabulary development. We get our reading and our listening and our speaking vocabulary from conversations we have and from books we read. And so if a kid reads a book about a mystery that takes place in a dungeon, they're going to have new vocabulary. They read books about a family vacation at the ocean, they're going to learn new vocabulary. And vocabulary is the best predictor of school success. And so that's another reason that I would do it.
I love that. The library for us to kind of build that vocabulary, it's kind of a haven in the summer. It's kind of first a place that we go for the kids because it kind of makes summer quiet for us. I'll just be honest as a parent. But second, it's kind of always air conditioned, and I'm kind of a grump when it gets hot. So I don't know if my reasons for going to the library are totally pure in the terms of being a really great parent. But I think there are actually kind of better reasons for visiting our local libraries and even maybe kind of our church libraries. What does it show kids when parents make library visits a part of kind of the summer bucket list?
Yeah, again, it shows our kids that we value reading, that we value literacy, that we think learning how to read and then reading is a beneficial, wise, smart use of your time. And again, some people listening are thinking, oh, but the library, there's so many bad books there. Well, there's so many good books there. So again, it's a place to teach discernment. So a child brings, a half a dozen books to you and says, Mommy, I'd like to check these out. And you notice that one of them is a rewriting of American history. No, we're not checking this out because the author has chosen to deny the truth. They bring you a book about, again, maybe presenting that gender is something you can choose. I would hope that you would say, not a good book. Let's go find something together that would be better for you. Maybe before you go to the library, you go and you do some research about good children's literature. If you have a bookstore in town, go to the bookstore in addition to the library. And usually a children's librarian or a person at a bookstore that works in the children's section will know which books are popular, which authors write with, good vocabulary, et cetera. And so that would be something to do for sure. Yeah. And I want to say, if people don't know this, but as soon as I say it, you're going to know it's true. Kids feel very secure when you read to them. Children pretty much know that daddy will not allow himself to be interrupted when he's reading me a book. When they sit on your lap, when you sit next to each other on a couch, when you're on the floor at a library and you're reading a book, kids feel loved and safe and secure, and that will change them. So maybe that's a good reason to go to the library.
I also wanted to ask you the opposite side of this, because it's natural for some of us to kind of go to the library, but the reality is sometimes I drag my kids kind of kicking and screaming, which is a funny picture to get when you're walking into a quiet library. But what should parents do whose kids don't really enjoy reading? Are there any good recommendations that you give to kind of those parents? Maybe even to start their kids towards reading, or to get them maybe thinking about reading more? What are your thoughts there for parents whose kids aren't really interested?
I was just talking to my sister-in-law before we recorded this particular episode about someone she and I know, and we're praying that some adult in this boy's life will choose to prioritize reading for him. So you pray. There's a boy we know who doesn't enjoy reading, and we're really concerned for his academic growth. We are praying that a parent or a step-parent, a grandparent, somebody will be able to reach out to this kid and convince him that reading isn't always hard, and it gets easier and better if you start to read. So maybe we pray. Second thing we do is we read and we let them see us read, especially men. If you have boys who do not sit still and read, it might be beneficial for them to see you sit and read. It can be a newspaper. It can be a magazine. It could even be a blog post or the script of a TED Talk. Ideally, it's a book with pages that turn. Daddy, do you like to read? They need to see that men slow down, and men don't always have to, if you will, have their hands busy, fixing something. It's a terrible stereotype, but that is a true sentiment. Boys need to see their dads read. And the third thing I'll say is, what do your kids enjoy? If you know your children, and you know what they want to become when they're older, or you know what they enjoy, you know what class they're looking forward to in the fall, then do some research before you go to the library. What books about airplanes does the library have? What would be the number on the nonfiction shelf? Where would I find the airplane books? Another great thing to do if you've not thought of it is you go to websites for different airlines and you do research. I remember teaching second graders before we had websites, of course, and my students, when they had assignments, that they would send a letter, a snail mail letter, to a company like Cheerios. Dear sir, my name is Peter James and I'm in Miss Cook's second grade class, and I want to know how you came up with the name Cheerios. Thank you for answering my letter. And I remember kids, they asked about Jell-O. Why is it spelled that way? And it was just so fun. They could choose a company they were curious about or a product they were curious about. And I taught them how to write a letter, and then they were so excited when the letters came back. And they always sent really cool promotional material. And guess what? Kids read the back of Cheerio boxes, and it was reading. So what do they want to be and what do they like to do? And can we introduce them to those products and to those things and to those ideas so that they are at least reading something?
There's a verse that kind of stuck out in my mind as Dr. Kathy was talking here near the end. It comes out of 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. And this is what's written. For you yourselves know, brothers, that our coming to you was not in vain. But though we had already suffered and been shamefully treated in Philippi, as you know, we had boldness in our God to declare to you the gospel of God in the midst of much conflict. For our appeal does not spring from error or impurity or any attempt to deceive. But just as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, so we speak not to please men, but to please God who tests our hearts. For we never came with words of flattery, as you know, nor with pretext for greed. God is our witness. Nor did we seek glory from people, whether for you or from others, though we could have made demands as apostles of Christ. But we were gentle among you, like a nursing mother taking care of her own children. So, being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also of our own selves, because you had become very dear to us. This testimony of Paul and those that were traveling with him in their ministry to the Thessalonians, I think is an example for those of us that are parenting and for others of us who are working with kids in how we should be approaching big topics, especially things like mentoring kids in reading, that there is this leadership to provide for them as people who are gentle, caring for their own children. And knowing that in this, we're not only sharing with them maybe the gospel of God, but we're also, as Paul says, sharing our own selves. And in those things, I think that inspires a different approach or vision of the people we work with. It inspires love in us. And we know that love comes from God. And I think living into that is a bright light that shines and cuts through some of the darkest realities that our culture might be facing or that our kids might be experiencing. And I hope that's an encouragement for you today. I want to thank you for joining us on the Celebrate Kids podcast in our daily segment, Facing the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Koch, my name is Wayne Stender, and I want to say thanks for listening, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.